It is the Saturday after the 2024 presidential election. My disappointment is immeasurable, and this country is ruined. Hey Taylor, welcome back. I'm Azaria. I read, I write, I live in a no-name Nebraska city that is very gloomy, and so we're in my bathroom. I hope you like it. I was considering making this video about how art and especially writing can be used as a tool to fight conservatism and fascism and injustice overall. But I was doing some research to discuss that, and I found some really good articles that I would essentially be rehashing if I were to make that video topic. So if any of the 7 of you are at all interested in something like that, you can check the description box for links to those kinds of articles. Today I actually wanted to take a delve into my past and into my present, honestly. And I wanted to tell you about all of my full-length manuscripts that I either scrapped or am currently working on. I think it's really helpful to work on several projects at once, obviously with the understanding that when you're splitting your time between different projects, it'll take you longer to finish just one of them. But I think it's really beneficial because, first of all, it keeps the creative juices flowing. So even when you run kind of out of ideas for one project, or you hit sort of a writer's block kind of thing, or if you're just burnt out with a particular project, maybe the subject matter, maybe the characters are a little bit complex to figure out, then pivoting and working on a different project can ensure that you are keeping up with your creative practice, that you're still working and improving, and it can help really keep those muscles fine-tuned. It also ensures that I always have something recent and current that I'm working on for when random opportunities crop up. So for example, my institution just nominated me for an award of some sort, and it was really random. I didn't know what was happening, and so one of my professors reached out to me and said, hey, we're nominating you for this award, send me a good story. And because I work on so many things at once, I have a good story that he had never seen before. I also think that mapping out your works in progress can be really beneficial. It can really highlight the themes or the topics or the concepts that tend to be instrumental in your own work. Even if you aren't planning on having a sort of through line for your work, so a sort of theme that applies to all of your pieces, or a concept that applies to all of your pieces, or characters that apply to all of your pieces, like if you're not doing a Faulkner thing where you use the same characters in several different novels or stories, it can help you understand what things you unconsciously or subconsciously are always putting in your stories. So for example, I write a lot about familiar relationships. I write a lot about religion, about spirituality. And if I wasn't really keeping track of the things that I'm working on and what within those things I'm trying to highlight and why I work on those pieces, then I wouldn't know those things about myself. And knowing what kind of themes you usually turn to is really good information for your bio, for your query letter, and even can be useful when you're working directly with an editor or a publisher. So some of the works in progress that I'm going to tell you about have been shelved completely. Some of them have been shelved, and I've taken certain aspects of the project and incorporated them into other projects. Some of them, they're just on the back burner right now, and then I'm working on currently 4 different works in progress. Just so you know the kind of things that I usually write, in addition to the themes that I usually focus on, I tend to write literary fiction, magical realism literary fiction, that has a sort of romance element. And that's because I tend to write character-driven fiction. And you can ask like literally anyone about characterization, about character development, and the best way to work out who your characters are, what they care about, is to put them in conversation with someone else. Relationships tend to be really important in my stories because they're so character driven, and so romance relationships are likely some of the most important relationships that we'll have as people just because we tend to have so few of them. So romance is usually included in my projects. So the first project I'll tell you about is just a little pop culture short story collection. That's really as far as I got with that idea. I had some ideas for short stories, but as far as anything else, any other themes or concepts that would be uniting the collection, it's just about pop culture. I chose pop culture because all of my other stories, the novel that I'm working on, they all incorporate mentions or allusions to pop culture in some way. And that's because pop culture is just a general interest of mine, but it's also a research interest of mine. Last semester, I actually got the opportunity to present at 2 pop culture conferences, and it was really fun. My second presentation, which took place in March, it was at a national pop culture conference, was a little polarizing. And so that was really fun to see in real time. I'll give you an idea of kind of the kinds of stories that I was planning for this. One of them is about what would happen if Tupac was resurrected like Jesus. And so it was just this pop culture collection. The stories were all going to be focused on Black pop culture, things like conspiracy theories, cult like behavior connected to pop culture, things like that. But for now, that project is shelved just because I'm working on so many other things, and I think I'll come back around to it later. The second project we're going to call Project Almanac. Project Almanac was actually my thesis for my master's in fine arts and creative writing. It was a short story collection, a magical realism short story collection about a secret city in Virginia that was started by Black women. And at the center of the city was this source of magic that would manifest throughout the city in spontaneous ways. The idea of the city was that there were only sort of two ways that you could get there. You could get there if you were invited by someone that already lived there, or if you needed it for some reason, if you needed a safe place, a refuge, then you would be able to get to the city. And the city was also always close by if you needed it, and only if you needed it. Otherwise, it was far away and took a while to get to. If you didn't need it and you weren't invited, then you would just go around the city. And this particular idea was inspired by Bailey's Cafe by Gloria Naylor. Her most popular book was called Women of Brewster Place, and it was made into a film and a television series. And Bailey's Cafe, the idea of that novel was that the cafe was not in a fixed place. It was always nearby when necessary. And then this idea kind of is similar to another story that I read that inspired a different work in progress, but I'll tell you about that when we get there. Some of the characters from Project Almanac were repurposed into Project Girl specifically, and then into other short stories. My next work in progress was a novel called Project Mother. Project Mother was a novel about a sheep farm. Specifically, it was about a man who was raising his grandchildren, his granddaughter and grandson, on this sheep farm after their parents were involved in a fatal car crash. At the beginning of the novel, there's something off about the grandfather. He has this spontaneous desire to be a preacher. He has this spontaneous belief that he is a god, not even a god, but God. And he has been extremely quick to anger in the recent days prior to the novel taking place. And we very quickly find out that he's acting this way because he has rabies. And if you don't know, rabies is fatal to humans. And there are all kinds of symptoms of rabies, but one specific symptom that I use in the story is hydrophobia, so the fear of water. So after their grandfather passes away, the grandson and granddaughter then take over the farm, but the granddaughter kind of has always wanted to leave this farm. She does not want to live on this farm for the rest of her life. And then she ends up conceiving a child. And then it's just sort of them navigating that space, this space where the man that raised them has passed away, and he kind of did some horrific things before he passed away because he was rabid. So they're kind of reckoning with that, with what will this man's legacy be, especially if we don't want to run this farm. And then the granddaughter is particularly thinking about how she'll make a way for herself and her child. This project was specifically inspired by Salvage the Bones by Jesmyn Ward. I really kind of enjoyed the way that that book is very clearly on the side of Esh, who's the main character, who has this really troubled relationship with sex and maybe even sexuality. Ward's novel is also about familial dynamics and kind of family loyalty, and those are themes that I read about a lot as well. I was really, really inspired by that book. I read it multiple times. The next work in progress was called Cascading Failures. That's the exact name. I've been codenaming everything else, but Cascading Failures is what that one was called. And I got that term specifically from an episode of Shameless, if you guys have ever seen that show. And Cascading Failures is what they call, I believe, when a bunch of airplanes crash. And so I wrote this novel between my junior and senior year of undergrad when I was getting my bachelor's in arts and English. And I finished that novel and it was 72 pages and I didn't have anything else to say. I didn't have any ideas for revision. I didn't know what I could do to improve it, nothing like that. And so I ended up shelving it. And that novel is about these two twins. They're men. and sort of coming of age in 1940s in Virginia. One does blue collar work, one is college educated, or he's getting his college education, and they just essentially are going in these different directions. The blue collar twin is a devout Christian, and he is specifically struggling with some undiagnosed mental health issues, and he goes through psychosis um, several times throughout the novel. The other twin is not religious, he's an atheist, and he's also a gay man and has completely divested from the church against the wishes of his mother and his twin brother. And so, the kind of inciting incident, the thing that really sets the novel off, is that someone in their neighborhood sets their church on fire. And so this community has to reckon with what religion means to them. They have to decide whether or not to rebuild the church. And if they do rebuild that church, what's going to be different about it? What's going to make people want to come to this church that didn't want to come to the old one? What's going to make people believe in this church and not burn it down? That's kind of the point of that novel. Some of these elements are also in Project Girl, specifically the twins and their diverging paths, which I think diverging paths are common in twin narratives, right? This kind of looking for autonomy when you're multiple. I think that happens a lot in literature and in art in general. I actually drew there are three main characters in this novel, Cascading Failures, and I also am an illustrator, so I actually drew them several years ago when I still lived in Indianapolis, and they were actually exhibited at a show. And so I'll just put the pictures up here. I think now if I were to draw them, I would be better at it. I'd be a lot better at it, but I still like the images, and they still do look the way that they look in my head, basically. The next work in progress is called Project Wander, and it's about this wandering woman. She's like this ageless beauty. She's in her early 40s. The reason that she wanders is because her mother essentially did something that she shouldn't have done. As a young woman, and her mother became cursed. And so she just passed the curse on to her child so that she could live a more peaceful life. And so the curse essentially means that everything that the main character touches, she ruins. She ruins everything. She ruins her relationships. Any business that she goes into and works for that business, she'll ruin that business. And so, in order to minimize harm, she travels from place to place. And so, the novel kicks off when she's in this very, very small Virginia city. I'm from Virginia, can you tell? She's in this very small Virginia city. She's specifically a lounge singer, actually, and she meets this young man, and they end up falling in love. And he's quite a bit younger than her. He's maybe like 25, and she's in her early 40s. And I did that specifically because this woman has never had a romantic relationship before, for fear that she would ruin the person that she had a relationship with. And so it was purposeful to sort of have her fall in love with this younger person and to attempt for the first time in her early 40s to navigate that kind of relationship. So she feels loved, she feels nurtured, she feels satisfied in this relationship. And then she starts to kind of wonder, am I really cursed? Because I'm pretty damn happy right now. But then several things happen to sort of reveal that she actually is cursed. And she conceives a child with this man, and so she has to decide whether she is going to be like her mother and pass on the curse so that she can live a peaceful life, or if she's just going to leave her child so that she can carry the curse far away. She's going to try to stay in her child's life, but potentially ruin him. And obviously, there's some allegories there, right? Between, if I conceive a child and I'm not in the position to raise one, do I give it up for adoption? Do I attempt to take care of the child? Do I get an abortion? There's some allegories there. I really do think that I'm going to go back to this project. I use some of the characters in Project Almanac, and some of the concepts, particularly about being cursed, are in Project Girls. But I really enjoyed the characters and the setting of this novel, and kind of the ideas that I was wrestling around with. So I might pick that one back up after I finish my current works in progress. My last shelved work in progress is called Project California. Project California is about a girl whose mother passes away very young. Her father takes care of her for a few years, and then they drive from Virginia all the way to California, and he essentially drops his daughter off on his mother's doorstep. The main character's grandmother is a woman from the Dominican Republic, but she also has Cuban heritage, and she specifically practices Santeria, and she is a Santera, which is a priestess. The grandmother also owns like acres and acres of strawberry fields. And because she owns these fields, she employs a lot of other Afro-Cuban, Afro-Dominican people, and they pick the strawberries and they process the strawberries. And she essentially has this small fortune that she's sitting on, even though she lives as a very humble woman. In the present of the novel, the grandmother has passed away. And so at the beginning of the novel, our main character is sort of processing that death, thinking back to the days right before her grandmother passed away. And then she starts to think about whether or not she is going to take over her grandmother's fields or if she's going to pass them along to someone else in the community that she really trusts who would really want to do that stuff. She doesn't really want to take over the fields. The only kind of benefit to doing so would be that they were her grandmother's and she would be taking care of something that her grandmother loved. At the end of the strawberry season, she decides to kind of close everything down, allow things to continue in her absence with that community member that she really trusts, while she and a couple of other characters go across the country to Virginia to find her father. I ended up writing some of this story into a short story, and that short story actually got longlisted for an award last year. I don't remember what award, but that kind of showed me that, okay, this story has some potential. Maybe I should come back to this. So now we're on to the current works in progress. So the first one is something that I have a kind of vague idea about. It's called Project Space, and it's just about women in transitional or liminal psychological spaces. So, women that are processing changes in their lives and how they're doing that. And I was particularly inspired to write this collection from a collection that I read called Some of Them Will Carry Me by a writer named Giada Scodolero. I haven't written any full stories for this one yet, but I'm really hoping to in the future. This is another one of the themes that I regularly write about, so I don't think I'll have any shortage of stories, but I do want to write stories specifically for this collection if possible. My next work in progress is called Project Tomato, and it's actually my dissertation, so it won't even be readable until 2028 essentially. And by readable, I mean that it won't be coherent to others until 2027, 2028. Project Tomato is a generational narrative. It was inspired by novels like Homegoing and Cane River and Roots. And it starts off kind of like in a Romeo and Juliet way, where we have these kind of star-crossed lovers from different sides of the tracks. The man is from this really small and insular Black community. They're really community oriented. They do a kind of version of socialism similar to what the Black Panther Party used to do, in that they kind of provide childcare for one another, security for one another, food for one another, things like that. And then the woman is from the other side of the track. She's actually from a wealthy Jack and Jill Black neighborhood, and she's actually a pageant queen. So she's won several pageants across Virginia. There's this kind of inciting incident that happens that gets the woman isolated from her community and that raises the other community to the ground, the poor community. And so these two fall in love and they come together and they decide to kind of start their own community. And they do that through creating a family. Spontaneous location change. I'm not even gonna explain it. You need to know why he changed locations. Over time, this family becomes progressively more insular. So with each generation, they keep isolating themselves and turning inward instead of outward, save a few people in the family that decide to divest from that idea. And they kind of have to reckon with what they lose when they become so insular and losing contact with those family members that have kind of divested from that idea of insularity. The next work in progress, I'll give you the work in progress title because it's not the actual title. It's called A Fake Artist Goes to New York. And A Fake Artist Goes to New York is actually the name of a card game, I believe. It's like a drawing card game. And so because it's the name of that game, I'm not going to use it as the actual title of my book, but I think it's a fitting working title. And that book follows three different main characters. One of them is a failed stand-up comic, so think about Joaquin Phoenix's Joker, but a little calmer. I would say he's a bit calmer. The second one is a girl who peaked in high school. So she was really popular in high school, really beautiful girl, and then something happened to her after high school that kind of caused this downward spiral for her. And the third character is a man who is estranged from his wife and children because of his own violent crime and his attempt to kind of reckon with that and to live his life in a better way is at the heart of his storyline. So they're all kind of trying to change their lives, and that's their motivation throughout the story, but they're all at very different starting points and they envision very different ending points. And so their kind of storylines will crisscross and overlap and stuff like that. But they do have three kind of distinct storylines. And I think the fact that they overlap is really what keeps it from being just a short story collection, is the fact that they overlap and the ways in which they overlap. My penultimate work in progress is called Project Virginia, and it's a short story collection about addiction. And Taylor actually gave me the idea for the name of this collection. I'm still using it. The collection was inspired by the idea of Amsterdam and the show The Wire. If you've never seen The Wire, it's a show mostly about organized drug crime. Amsterdam specifically refers to three locations in Baltimore where the police force legalized drug use, which I don't know if you know this, they can't do that. The police can't make things legal that were not already legal, but I digress. And so what happened in The Wire is this police, I believe he was a sergeant or something like that. He picked these three areas, told people that use drugs, people that sold drugs, you can do that in these areas, but not outside of them. If you're outside of them, we're going to arrest you. And they saw a huge drop in violent crime and homicides, and they saw a huge sort of boost in community morale. So this collection takes that idea and says, okay, what if we were to do something like this, but in the American way? Which is to say, what if we were to do something like this and legalize drugs in a very specific area, but without doing any education or providing any supports that would help destigmatize addiction and drug use? What if we legalized drugs in this one specific area and didn't think about how that would affect other crime and there was still over policing? Like all of my other projects, that one is really character driven as well, but the idea of this kind of drug zone is like a backdrop for all of the stories, and then the stories themselves are really about characters and their relationships to addiction and how the new changes in their city are affecting them. And my final work in progress, the one that I'm working on right now that I'm pitching next year, is called Project Girls. Project Girls was inspired by um, a, by a novel called Ours by Philip B. Williamson, which is about a secret community of Black people. It's a really great book. And it was also inspired by a book by Alice Walker called By the Light of My Father's Smile. It's a novel about twins going in opposite directions, very similar to Cascading Failures in that regard. And then it incorporates a secret community similar to Project Almanac. There's also the idea of a curse, as I said earlier, which I got from Project Wander. And so it's just about these two twins that are going in these opposite directions. One becomes a part of this secret community, the other kind of stays on the outside, and then later they clash. And that's really all I'll say about that. I don't really know how to describe that one without giving away too much. It incorporates a lot of ideas about the legal system, a lot of ideas about social issues, about political issues, but in a sort of, it's very character driven, but the plot is also very tangible. And so that is actually the book that I'm going to be querying at the top of the year. And I've had a couple of agents express interest in just the idea of it and the actual name of it. They've been really fascinated with the name, and that's why I've been really, really hush-hush about it. Even people that I've let read some of the novel, they don't know the name of the novel. I'm really paranoid that someone's going to take my novel name. So in addition to that novel, I'm going to be querying Project Virginia and Project Tomato at the beginning of the year. Even though, like I said, I know for a fact Project Tomato won't be done, even close to done, until 2027 or 2028. It's good to give agents an idea of what you're working on. And I'm actually going to talk to you more about that when I tell you my plan for getting an agent in 2025. So those are all of my works in progress. I hope you liked some of them. I hope that they were appealing to you, because it's kind of the point, right? What are your works in progress? And did you like this background more or the other one? I'm voting for the other one. The lighting is better over there, but I don't know. Tell me what you think.